You know, it's kind of funny. Some of the oldest, simplest bugs in computer science are still the ones that can cause the most damage. What if I told you a simple math error, one we've known about for decades, was just found right in the heart of Apple's latest operating systems, and it could give any app total control? Well, today we're going to tear down a kernel vulnerability that's a perfect reminder of why the basics still matter so much in modern security.
And I'm not being dramatic here. This isn't some theoretical what-if scenario. We're talking about the core of a classic security nightmare: privilege escalation. You have a malicious app, right? Normally it's stuck in its little sandbox, totally locked down. But with a bug like this, it can find one tiny crack, break out, and suddenly it has the keys to the entire kingdom. It's game over.
And this exact thing happened with a vulnerability tracked as CVE-2025-46285. It was found lurking deep inside Apple's XNU kernel, the very core of iOS and macOS. So yeah, let's dive in and break down exactly how this thing works, from the code itself to the massive impact it had.
Okay, first things first. To really get why this is such a big deal, you have to understand what the attacker is after. Their ultimate goal is to get what's called root-level access. And on any system, like a Mac or an iPhone, root is, well, it's God mode. So let's look at the official scorecard here. The CVS score is 7.8, which is firmly in the high severity bucket. The impact? An app can gain root privileges. And again, root just means total, unrestricted control over everything. Now, the attack vector here is local, and this is super important. It means the attacker needs to already have some code running on your device, like a sketchy app you downloaded from somewhere. This exploit isn't for getting in. It's for an app that's already in to break out of its cage and take over the whole zoo.
So, what caused this chaos? You might be expecting some wild, super sophisticated new attack method, right? Nope. It was actually one of the most fundamental programming mistakes you can make, a problem we've known about for ages, and it all comes down to how computers tell time.
The vulnerability here is a classic integer overflow. Okay, so what does that even mean? Imagine you have a variable in your code, like a little box that can only hold numbers up to, say, 100. If you try to stuff the number 101 into it, the computer doesn't crash. Instead, the number wraps around and becomes 0 or even a negative number. It's a predictable math error, and when that predictable error happens in a security check, well, that's when things get really bad.
The best way to think about it is like an old car's odometer. You know, when it hits 9999999, the next mile doesn't break it, it just rolls right back over to all zeros. An integer overflow is the exact same idea. And in this case, an attacker could set an expiration date so far in the future that it would wrap around and become a date in the distant past, and that little bit of time travel is all they needed to trick the system's security checks.
So the root cause here was the use of a 32-bit signed integer to keep track of time in the kernel. A 32-bit integer can only count up to about 2.1 billion. When you're counting seconds since 1970, which is how these systems work, you run out of numbers in, you guessed it, the year 2038. This is the infamous year 2038 problem we've been talking about for decades. So an attacker just had to provide a date past 2038, and boom, overflow. A 64-bit integer, on the other hand, can store a number so massive that we won't have to worry about it for literally billions of years.
So if the problem was basically using a bucket that was too small to hold the number, the solution thankfully was pretty straightforward: get a bigger bucket.
And here it is. This is a super simplified look at the code change. The original code used a data type called timet, which, for historical compatibility reasons, is often just a 32-bit integer. The fix was to change it to int64t, which explicitly tells the computer, hey, use a 64-bit integer for this, no matter what. The actual security logic, the if statement, didn't change at all. They just changed the data type, and that was it. So why does this one simple change fix everything? Well, it's pretty simple, really. First, the 64-bit integer can hold a date that's billions of years in the future, so there's no way to make it overflow. Second, since you can't cause an overflow, you can't make it wrap around to a past date. And third, if you can't trick the time check, the whole attack path is just gone. Problem solved. All right, so a simple bug with a surprisingly simple fix. But the story doesn't end there. The implications of this are huge, and it's a massive learning opportunity for all of us. So what are the big takeaways here? First off, let's just talk about the blast radius. It was enormous, because this flaw wasn't in some random app. It was in the XNU kernel, the shared foundation of all of Apple's operating systems. That means your iPhone was vulnerable, your Mac was vulnerable, your Apple TV, your Vision Pro, even your Apple Watch. A single tiny bug, echoing across literally hundreds of millions of devices. And here's something that's really important to remember. Apple didn't find this bug themselves. It was discovered and responsibly reported by two external security researchers, Kai-Tao Zi and Xiaolong Bai from Alibaba Group. This is a perfect example of why the wider security community and bug bounty programs are absolutely essential. They find the things that even the biggest companies in the world can miss.
So let's wrap up with the lessons learned. If you're a developer, the message is crystal clear. Be explicit about your data types. Don't rely on defaults, especially for things like timestamps that just keep growing. Use fixed size types like int64t. And for those of you on security teams, this is your wake-up call. Don't get so focused on fancy new attacks that you forget about the classics. Integer overflows are still out there, and they are still incredibly dangerous. We have to keep auditing for these old-school, primitive-level bugs, especially in critical code like kernels.
So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. As our software just gets more and more complex, with layers upon layers of code built over decades, what other simple bugs, these classic fundamental flaws, are just sitting there, waiting for someone to find them? It's a challenge for all of us, and something we should never stop thinking about.